Certified incident briefings. Real video evidence. Strict accountability. You are viewing Bodycam incident reports.
Step away from the vehicle now! Hands where I can see them!
This is my house. This is my car. You're standing in my driveway, officer.
Don't play games with me! Turn around now!
You're escalating a situation that doesn't exist. Look at the address. Look at the plate.
Last warning!
This is how innocent
The
people
command
get hurt.
shattered the peaceful silence of a Saturday morning in Oak Creek, a wealthy suburb just north of Atlanta. Marcus Thorne didn't flinch. He didn't drop the yellow microfiber sponge he was holding, nor did he scramble in panic. Instead, he slowly straightened his backwater dripping from his hands onto the pavement and turned his head toward the source of the shouting. He was standing in his own driveway. The water hose was still running, creating a steady rhythmic hiss against the concrete. "I said step away from the car," Officer Derek Vance shouted again, his right hand hovering dangerously close to the grip of his service pistol. Vance was 32 years old with a high and tight haircut that hadn't evolved since his police academy graduation, and a jaw set in perpetual aggression. He stood near the edge of the manicured lawn, his posture, rigid eyes narrowed behind tactical sunglasses. Marcus looked at the officer, then back at the car he had been lovingly washing for the last hour. It was a 1965 Shelby Cobra replica, painted a deep, metallic midnight blue with white racing stripes. It was his pride and joy, a retirement gift to himself after 3 decades of service to his country. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice a low, rumbling baritone that carried the weight of command. "I am washing my car. Can I help you with something?" "Don't get smart with me," Vance snapped, stepping onto the driveway. His boots crunched loudly on the gravel accent strip. "We've had reports of suspicious activity, a subject fitting your description looking into vehicles. Now back away from that car before I make you back away." Marcus stood 6'2", his shoulders broad and powerful, a physique maintained through a lifetime of physical training. He wore a simple gray t-shirt tucked into worn blue jeans and old work boots. He looked every bit the working man, but his posture, feet shoulder-width apart, chin up, eyes scanning, was pure military. "Fitting my description?" Marcus asked, his expression unreadable. "You mean a black man in a driveway, officer? I live here. This is my house. This is my car. I'm drying the wax." "I'm not going to ask you again," Vance barked, unholstering his taser and pointing its center mass at Marcus's chest. The red laser dot danced on the wet gray cotton of Marcus's shirt. "Turn around, hands on your head. Do it now." "You are making a mistake," Marcus said calmly. He didn't raise his hands immediately. He knew that sudden movements were what got men like him killed. He moved with deliberate slowness, placing the sponge on the hood of the Shelby. "My wallet is on the porch railing 10 feet away. It has my driver's license and my concealed carry permit. It lists this address." "I don't care about your wallet," Vance yelled, adrenaline spiking his voice into a shrill register. "I care about you complying with a lawful order. You're trespassing and you're attempting to steal a high-value vehicle. Turn around." Marcus looked at the young officer. He saw the shaking hands, the sweat beading on the man's upper lip, the fear masking itself as anger. Marcus had seen that look before, usually on the faces of green privates during their first firefight. But this wasn't a war zone. This was his home. And this man wasn't a soldier. He was a public servant who had decided within seconds of arriving that Marcus was a criminal. "I am turning around," Marcus announced, narrating his movements to ensure the recording he hoped to God his doorbell camera was capturing this would show his compliance. "I am complying, but you need to lower your weapon, son. You are escalating a situation that does not exist." "Don't call me son," Vance spat, closing the distance. "And keep your mouth shut." If Officer Vance had bothered to run the license plate on the Shelby, the plate that clearly read CMBTVET, or if he had taken 3 seconds to look at the man he was threatening, he might have paused. But bias is a blinder, and Vance was wearing it like a thick wool hood. Marcus Thorne was not a car thief. He was Command Sergeant Major Marcus Thorne, United States Army retired. He had spent 30 years in the infantry leading men through the scorching deserts of Iraq and the impossible mountain passes of Afghanistan. He had a Silver Star for valor awarded after he pulled 3 wounded soldiers from a burning Humvee under heavy machine gun fire in Fallujah. He had 2 Purple Hearts. He had served as the senior enlisted advisor to a 3-star general. When Marcus retired 5 years ago, he transitioned into the private sector as a defense consultant for a major logistics firm. He made a comfortable 6-figure salary advising the Pentagon on supply chain security. He had bought this house in Oak Creek because it was quiet. The schools were good for his grandchildren when they visited, and the 3-car garage gave him space to work on his engines. He was a man who had lived his life by a strict code, duty, honor country. He respected authority because he had been the authority. He understood the chain of command. He understood the difficulty of policing. He had conducted patrols in hostile cities where everyone was a potential threat, but he also knew the difference between vigilance and harassment. As he stood there, hands slowly rising to interlock behind his head, Marcus felt a cold, familiar fury rising in his gut. It wasn't fear. Marcus hadn't felt fear in the traditional sense since 2004. It was a profound disappointment. He had bled for the flag that was stitched onto the sleeve of Officer Vance's uniform. He had buried friends draped in that flag, and now that same authority was being weaponized against him in his own driveway because he dared to wash a luxury car while having black skin. He utilized the tactical breathing techniques he had taught thousands of young soldiers. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Keep the heart rate down. Keep the mind sharp. Assess the threat. The threat was a 32-year-old man with a badge and a taser acting on impulse and prejudice. Marcus knew that if he resisted even slightly, Vance would pull the trigger. Or worse, switch to the Glock 19 on his hip. Marcus could disarm him. He knew at least 3 ways to break the officer's wrist and take control of the weapon before Vance could react. But that would end his life just as surely as a bullet. The legal system would not see a decorated veteran defending himself. It would see a violent suspect attacking an officer. So Marcus chose the hardest path for a warrior submission. He stood still, the morning sun warming his back, listening to the birds chirp in the magnolia trees, while the man behind him treated him like dirt. "I am not resisting," Marcus said again, his voice steady as a rock. "I am Command Sergeant Major Marcus Thorne. I own this property. You are violating my civil rights, and you are violating your oath." "Shut up," Vance yelled now right behind him. "Spread your legs wider." Marcus complied. He knew that maintaining his dignity didn't mean fighting back physically. It meant maintaining his composure while the other man lost his. He was gathering intelligence. He was memorizing the badge number he had glimpsed, number 492. He was noting the time, 10:15 a.m. He was preparing for the battle that would come later, not in the driveway, but in the courtroom. The call had come in 17 minutes earlier. Mrs. Agatha Miller lived across the street in a colonial-style house with manicured hedges that looked like they were cut with a ruler. Agatha was 72, a widow who spent her days monitoring the neighborhood Facebook group and watching the street through her sheer curtains. She was the self-appointed guardian of Oak Creek, a role she interpreted as keeping the neighborhood safe from anyone who didn't look like her or her late husband. She had seen Marcus pull the Shelby out of the garage. She had seen him turn on the hose. In her mind, the narrative constructed itself instantly. That car is too nice. He doesn't look like the doctors or lawyers who live here. He's wearing dirty boots. He must be the help, or worse, he's stealing it. She didn't recognize Marcus despite him living there for 2 years because she had never bothered to look him in the eye or wave when he checked the mail. To her, he was invisible until he became a threat. She dialed the non-emergency line, but her voice pitched it as a crisis. "There's a man," she whispered urgently. "He's in the driveway of the house on Elm Street. The big blue house. He's He's stripping a car. It looks like a classic car. He doesn't belong here. I think he might have a weapon. He looks very large." The dispatcher had coded it as a suspicious person, but when the call flashed onto Officer Derek Vance's computer terminal, he read Grand Theft Auto in progress. Vance was a problem. His file at the precinct was thick, though not with commendations. In his 5 years on the force, he had accrued 14 complaints. Discourteous conduct, excessive force, bias-based profiling. Most had been dismissed by a review board that preferred to bury problems rather than fix them, labeled as unfounded or exonerated. Vance viewed himself as a sheepdog. He believed the world was full of wolves, and it was his job to hunt them before they could hurt the sheep. The problem was, Vance saw wolves everywhere. He saw wolves in teenagers walking home from school. He saw wolves in families having barbecues in public parks. And today he saw a wolf in a black man washing a convertible. He didn't see a neighbor. He didn't see a citizen. He saw a predator. When he pulled his patrol cruiser up to the curb, he didn't check the house number against the registration records, which would have shown Marcus Thorne as the owner of both. He didn't scan the scene for danger. He created the danger. "Dispatch, I'm on scene," Vance had radioed, his voice tight. "Male black subject messing with a high-end vehicle. Looks like he's trying to scrub it down, maybe remove evidence. I'm going in." He had exited the car with his mind already made up. The interrogation was a formality. The arrest was a foregone conclusion. In Vance's mind, he wasn't harassing a homeowner. He was catching a felon. It fed his ego the hunger to be the hero, the real police who took down bad guys, while the soft administration worried about public relations. He wanted a bust. He wanted to drag a criminal into the station and brag about how his instincts were right. He had no idea he was walking into a minefield of his own making. "Officer, listen to me," Marcus said, his hands still interlaced behind his head. The muscles in his shoulders ached not from strain, but from the tension of holding back. "If you reach into my back pocket, you will find a handkerchief. Nothing else. My ID is on the porch. Just walk over there and look at it." I said, "Keep your mouth shut." Vance holstered the taser and grabbed Marcus's left wrist, yanking it down roughly. "You're under arrest." "For what?" Marcus demanded, his voice hardening. "State the charge." "Investigation of Grand Theft Auto, trespassing, resisting a lawful order, disorderly conduct." Vance rattled off the charges like a grocery list, twisting Marcus's arm behind his back with unnecessary force. He was trying to provoke a reaction. He wanted Marcus to pull away so he could justify a takedown. "Grand Theft Auto?" Marcus let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I bought this car 3 years ago from an auction in Arizona. The title is in my safe inside the house. The key fob is in my pocket. You are making a fool of yourself." "Stop fighting!" Vance screamed, though Marcus hadn't moved an inch. "I am not fighting," Marcus said clearly. "I am standing still. You are the one who is agitated. Look at the license plate, officer. Read what it says." Vance glanced down at the bumper. The chrome frame surrounded a specialized Georgia plate, CMBTVET. Beside it was a decal of the combat infantryman badge, a rifle set against a blue wreath. For a split second, Vance paused. The cognitive dissonance hit him. A car thief wouldn't have military plates. A car thief wouldn't tell him to check the ID on the porch. But Vance was too far in. His pride was on the line. If he backed down now, if he admitted he was wrong, he would lose face. He would be the cop who got scared off by a suspect's smooth talk. He doubled down. "Stolen plates," Vance muttered, convincing himself as he spoke. "Probably took 'em off another car to blend in. That's an old trick." "You are unbelievable," Marcus said, shaking his head. "My name is on the registration. My name is on the house deed. You are about to ruin your career, son." "That's a threat, you threatening an officer." Vance shoved Marcus forward, slamming his chest against the warm, wet hood of the Shelby. The sound of Marcus's body hitting the metal was a dull thud. The soap suds soaked into his shirt. The impact wasn't hard enough to injure him, but the disrespect was searing. This car, which he treated with surgical care, was now being used as a weapon against him. "That wasn't a threat," Marcus said, his cheek pressed against the wet metal. "That was an observation." "Give me your other arm." Vance struggled to grab Marcus's right wrist. Marcus allowed it. He had arms the size of tree trunks. If he had wanted to keep his arm free, Vance would have needed a hydraulic press to move it. But Marcus let his arm go limp, allowing the officer to pull it back. The metal cuffs clicked, once, twice. "Too tight," Marcus noted calmly. "You are cutting off circulation." "Stop complaining," Vance grunted, double-locking the cuffs. "You should have thought about that before you started stealing cars in my district." The sight of Marcus Thorne, a man who had led battalions, a man who had shaken hands with presidents, being manhandled in his own driveway, began to draw an audience. It wasn't just Mrs. Miller watching anymore. 2 houses down, Bill Henderson, a retired dentist, had come out to get his paper. Across the street, a young couple was walking their golden retriever. They stopped frozen on the sidewalk. "Hey!" Bill shouted, walking toward the edge of his lawn. "Hey! What are you doing?" "That's Marcus." Vance looked up, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Back up police business, stay back." "He lives there," Bill yelled, ignoring the command. "Officer, he's lived there for years. That's his car." "I said stay back or you're next," Vance threatened, puffing his chest out. Marcus twisted his head to look at his neighbor. "Bill, stay there. Record it. Just record it, Bill. Don't interfere." Bill pulled out his phone, his hands shaking with rage. The young couple did the same. Within seconds, 3 cameras were trained on Officer Vance. Vance ignored them, or pretended to. He grabbed Marcus by the upper arm and hauled him off the car. Marcus's boots scraped against the pavement. He left behind a smear of soap and a dent in the perfect wax job on the hood. "Walk!" Vance commanded, pushing Marcus toward the patrol car. Marcus walked. He walked with his head high. He didn't look down at his feet. He looked straight ahead past the patrol car, visualizing the future. He saw the courtroom. He saw the deposition. He saw this officer's personnel file being opened on a table. As they reached the car, Vance opened the back door. "Get in." Marcus had to bend awkwardly to fit his large frame into the cramped plastic seat. The cuffs bit into his wrists. He sat down, the hard plastic uncomfortable against his back. Vance slammed the door shut, sealing Marcus inside the cage. Through the wire mesh, Marcus watched his driveway. He saw the hose, still running water, pooling near the drain. He saw his yellow sponge lying in the dirt where it had fallen. He saw the bucket of soapy water overturned. It was a scene of domestic interruption, a still life of violated peace. Vance got into the driver's seat. He was breathing heavy, his heart rate clearly elevated. He typed something into his computer, his fingers jabbing the keys aggressively. "You're going to regret this," Vance said, looking at Marcus in the rearview mirror. "Coming into a nice neighborhood like this, thinking you can just take what you want." Marcus met his eyes in the mirror. The gaze was intense, piercing. It was the look of a man who had stared down warlords and terrorists. "I fought for your right to be this incompetent," Marcus said softly. "But I will also fight to ensure you never wear that badge again." Vance laughed, a nervous, arrogant laugh. Yeah. Tell it to the judge." He threw the car into drive and peeled away from the curb, leaving the water running and the neighbors staring in horror. The ride to the precinct took 15 minutes. Vance turned on the radio, blasting a talk show, trying to drown out the silence from the back seat. He kept glancing in the mirror, waiting for Marcus to start begging or cursing or kicking the windows. That's what perps did. They made noise, but Marcus Thorne was silent. He sat perfectly still. He was running a checklist in his mind. Physical status: wrists bruised, shoulder slightly strained, otherwise uninjured. Legal status: arrested without probable cause. Unlawful search and seizure. False imprisonment. Assault. Asset status: car abandoned, unlocked in driveway. House unlocked. He focused on his breathing. He did not give Vance the satisfaction of a single word. This silence unnerved Vance more than any scream could have. It was the silence of a predator waiting for the cage to open. By the time they pulled into the sally port of the precinct, Vance was fidgeting, turning the radio up louder, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. Vance pulled Marcus out of the car. "Let's go. Move." He marched Marcus through the heavy steel doors and into the processing area. The air smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. They walked past the holding cells and up to the booking desk. Sitting behind the high counter was Sergeant Tom Miller, no relation to Agatha. Sergeant Miller was 58 years old, a 30-year veteran of the force. He had bad knees, a heavy gut, and eyes that had seen everything. He was drinking a cup of coffee and reading a report when Vance shoved Marcus toward the bench. "What do we have here, Vance?" Miller asked, not looking up yet. "Grand theft auto in progress," Vance announced proudly. "Caught him stripping a classic Shelby over on Elm Street. Resisted arrest. Belligerent." Sergeant Miller looked up. He looked at Marcus. He saw the silver hair cut in a fresh military fade. He saw the posture. He saw the calm, intelligent eyes. He saw the expensive boots. He saw a man who radiated discipline, not desperation. Miller frowned. He looked at Vance, then back at Marcus. "Name?" Miller asked. "Thorne," Marcus said clearly. "Marcus, Command Sergeant Major, United States Army, retired." The room went dead silent. A deputy typing in the corner stopped. Sergeant Miller slowly put down his coffee cup. "Say that again," Miller asked. "Command Sergeant Major Marcus Thorne," Marcus repeated. "I reside at 4205 Elm Street. The officer arrested me in my own driveway while I was washing my vehicle. I identified myself. I offered my identification, which was 10 feet away. He refused to verify and assaulted me." Miller turned his head slowly toward Officer Vance. "Vance, did you run the plates?" The plates were stolen, Sarge." Vance stammered, his confidence cracking instantly. "They were combat vet plates, on a Shelby. It didn't look right. I knew he slapped them on there." "You arrested a sergeant major," Miller said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "for washing a car with veteran plates, and you assumed they were stolen." "He fit the description," Vance argued, his voice rising in panic. "Suspicious person. The caller said he was stripping the car." "I was drying the wax," Marcus interjected calmly. Miller stood up. He was a big man, and when he stood, he cast a long shadow. "Vance, give me the keys to the cuffs, now." "Sarge, you can't just—" "Give me the keys," Miller roared. The sound echoed off the cinder block walls. Vance fumbled for the keys, his hands shaking violently now. He handed them over. Miller walked around the desk, grabbed Marcus's wrists, and unlocked the cuffs. "Check his wallet," Marcus said, rubbing his wrists where deep red furrows had formed. "Officer Vance left it on my porch, but you can check the system. My social security number is—" He rattled it off. Miller typed it in. His screen filled with data. "Owner Marcus James Thorne. Address 4205 Elm Street. Status verified. No warrants. Concealed carry permit active. Security clearance top secret." Miller looked at Vance with a look of pure disgust. "You idiot. You absolute colossal idiot." I didn't know," Vance whispered. "Get the watch commander." Marcus said, his voice cold steel. "Get Captain Reynolds down here. Now." Captain Frank Reynolds was in his office reviewing budget allocations when the call came from the front desk. He didn't walk. He ran. Reynolds was a former Marine. He knew Marcus Thorne by reputation. They had met at a veterans charity gala 2 years prior. When Reynolds burst into the booking area, he saw Marcus standing by the desk, rubbing his wrists, looking like a statue of judgment. Vance was standing in the corner, looking like a child who had just broken a priceless vase. "Marcus," Captain Reynolds said, breathless, extending a hand. "My God. I don't even have the words." Marcus didn't shake the hand. He looked at it, then looked Reynolds in the eye. "Captain." Reynolds turned to Vance. The fury radiating off the captain was palpable. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Vance," Reynolds said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Step into my office, now." "Captain, I was following protocol." Vance tried to plead. "Protocol." Reynolds stepped into Vance's personal space. "What protocol tells you to ignore a combat veteran license plate? What protocol tells you to ignore a man offering to show you ID? What protocol tells you to drag a homeowner off his property because a neighbor got twitchy?" He didn't belong. Vance started, then stopped, realizing what he was about to say. "Finish that sentence," Reynolds dared him. "Finish it. He didn't belong where? In a house he bought. In a car he paid for. In a neighborhood he served his country to protect." Vance stared at the floor silence, his only defense. "Badge and gun," Reynolds commanded. "On the desk. You are done for the day. You are on administrative leave pending an immediate internal affairs investigation. And pray to whatever God you believe in that the sergeant major decides not to sue this city into the ground." Vance stripped off his gun belt. He unpinned the badge from his chest. He placed them on the booking desk with a clatter. He looked naked without them, just a small, prejudiced man in a polyester uniform. Reynolds turned back to Marcus. "Sergeant Major, I will drive you home myself. I will have a detail clean up your driveway. I will have the car inspected for any damage. We will make this right." Marcus adjusted his shirt, brushing the dried soap flakes from his chest. "Captain, you can drive me home, but you cannot make this right. Not today." He looked at Vance one last time. "You wanted a wolf, son, you caught one, but now you're locked in the room with him and you don't have the keys anymore." The video from Bill Henderson's phone hit the internet 3 hours later. By Monday morning, it had 6 million views. The image of the white officer screaming at the calm, compliant black man, the man with the posture of a king and the patience of a saint, ignited a firestorm. The hashtag Commander Thorne trended globally. News crews camped out on Elm Street. They interviewed Mrs. Agatha Miller, who claimed she was just trying to help, and then slammed her door when asked if she would have called the cops on a white neighbor. They interviewed Bill Henderson, who called Vance a disgrace to the uniform. But the most damning evidence was the body cam footage. Released by the department in an attempt to show transparency, it only confirmed the public's outrage. It showed Vance's immediate aggression. It showed his refusal to look at the ID. It showed his bias, naked and ugly. The fallout was swift and brutal. Officer Derek Vance was fired 2 weeks later. The Internal Affairs report was scathing, citing gross negligence, racial profiling, and conduct unbecoming. He was stripped of his certification, ensuring he would never work in law enforcement again. His name became a cautionary tale in police academies across the state. The lawsuit filed by Marcus Thorne's legal team, a team of high-powered attorneys who lined up for the privilege of representing him, was settled out of court. The city of Oak Creek paid Marcus Thorne $4.5 million. But the money didn't fix the scratch on the Shelby's hood. Marcus had to buff that out himself slowly, methodically, by hand. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his driveway again. It was another Saturday. The sun was shining. He was washing the Shelby. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the street. It was a new officer, a young woman. She slowed down as she passed his house. She didn't stop to interrogate him. She didn't glare. She simply rolled down her window, nodded respectfully, and said, "Morning, Sergeant Major. Car looks great." Marcus nodded back. "Morning, officer." He watched her drive away. He dipped his sponge into the bucket. The water was warm. The soap smelled of lemon and wax. It was a beautiful day. But as he wiped the fender, Marcus knew that the peace he felt was fragile. He knew that for men like him, even heroes' safety was often just an illusion dependent on who was watching and who was wearing the badge. He had won the battle. He had destroyed the enemy who attacked him. But the war against the assumption that he didn't belong, that war was far from over. It is a tragedy that in a country built on freedom, a man who dedicated his life to defending it can still be treated like an enemy in his own front yard. Marcus Thorne's discipline saved his life, but he shouldn't have needed combat training just to survive a car wash. It forces us to ask, how many others are in that back seat right now, men and women who didn't have the rank or the cameras to save them? If this story made you angry, if it made you think, then please, let's keep the conversation going. Do you think officers should be personally liable for settlements in cases of proven racial profiling? Should neighbors who make false bias-based 911 calls face criminal charges? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in pushing for change. And if you want to support more stories that reveal the truth, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching.
Behind every single piece of data lies a complex and fascinating narrative. And within every narrative, there is a hidden truth striving to be brought to light. We genuinely appreciate you being here to uncover it with us today.